You're listening to
Sound.
Insightful.
Bible teaching.
For a
Meaningful.
For a meaningful Christian walk.
Actually, tonight, it's all about confusion, but not to confuse you. So this is, in the Bible, Israel, the nation of Israel, was carried into captivity in Babylon for 70 years. And then the call came out to go back to Jerusalem to build up the temple. So you see here in this song, it talks about the people were scattered, they did not have unity. And they came together as one to build something up. So this is very positive. What we're talking about tonight is a group of people in unity to build something up, and it's extremely negative. So this sounds contradictory. It is. But you have to realize, we've been on this for several weeks now, there's always two lines. And we have God, and we've got the devil. God is trying to do something positive. He wants to build up the holy city, New Jerusalem, which is the consummation of the church. He wants to build up the body of Christ. He wants to build up his corporate expression. Then you've got Satan. And what is he doing? He's trying to frustrate God's move so God doesn't get what he wants. But he doesn't do it by the way of doing something completely opposite. If you wanted to stop someone from doing something, maybe you'd have a war, or you'd try to kill them or something like that. What Satan does is very, very subtle. Actually, he's really a bright guy. I don't like him. But it's almost like you got to give him his due. He's pretty clever. We're on to it. What? You can't hear me? We had the conference last weekend, the retreat. Immediately after that, some of us headed to Chicago. We had 2 more days of all day long fellowship. It was really good. We got done late last night, left early this morning and drove back. So a few of us are sick, the rest of us are tired. And this just brings out the rebellion in me. When Julia says, "Can you just move by the microphone?" And this is really important because that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So Julius, you have a purpose. But going back to what I was saying, the devil always does things, it's like a counterfeit. It's like an imitation. It's not the real deal. But it will fool people. If you wanted to, present something, you want to open a restaurant, and there's some famous restaurant, Banchan. Everyone loves it. So I'm gonna do something a little different. And it's going to look really the same. I'll call it Banchan. And, it'd be really similar. But then when you taste it, it's just not as good. But there'll be something else to bring you in. It's like, okay, it's just a lot cheaper. And you're like, okay, it's cheaper. It's no good. I get sick every time I eat it, but it's so cheap. I'll just go for it. There are subtle differences. We'll get into this tonight. So, who knows the story of the Tower of Babel? Raise your hand. Esther, you must be really tired. Her hand raised like this. she moved her hand slightly. Anyway, I'm going to read this portion. Tonight, I am going to keep the time, because I don't have enough energy to go too long. Okay, this is from Genesis chapter 11. This is immediately after Noah. Noah, remember, had 3 sons. And then they gave rise to all the peoples of the earth. It says the whole earth had one language and the same speech. Logical. It wasn't too many generations, And as they journeyed east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. So it's like everyone, the whole population of the world was there at that time. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks, burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and they had tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the surface of the whole earth." And Jehovah came down to see the city and the tower and which the children of men had built. And Jehovah said, "Behold, they are one people. They all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be kept from them. Come, let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So Jehovah scattered them from there over the surface of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there Jehovah confounded the language of all the earth, and from there Jehovah scattered them over the surface of all the earth. So this sounds like, let's make up a story about where all the languages, all the nations come from. And it's presented that way, and probably in Sunday school that's what you learned. Why do we have so many languages? Well, it's because this happened. But what you don't understand, I could never understand, is why would God do that? So they're going to build a tower. I mean, they're not going to reach all the way to God. If they thought so, we know you can't. Engineering-wise, you can't do it. You get up there, there's no oxygen, whatever. Did God really see them as a threat? I mean, he went down and he stopped the building. I mean, he didn't fire a cruise missile into it. He just, let's get them so they can't understand each other. And they were scattered. Formed all the different nations. Why would God do that? Do you know why, Zach?
I don't know. You gotta tell me.
Okay. You know why, right, David?
You gotta tell me.
Okay. So it's good you came tonight. It's a rainy night, midterms, people are sick. It's really good you came. Now remember Cain and Abel? Two sons, Adam and Eve. Cain killed Abel because Abel was worshiping God according to God's way. And Cain worshiped God according to his own concept. God did not accept Cain's offering. Cain was jealous, religious jealousy. He slew Abel. Things got bad. Get down to the time of Noah. God just can't tolerate it. He's going to kill everyone. Except Noah found favor in the eyes of Jehovah. So he preserves Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. But then you get this. And what is this? This is complete rebellion against God. If you read the material for this week, you already know the answer to some of these questions. But one key statement is here, let us make a name for ourselves. Why do they need a name for themselves? Why do they need to be prominent? This was like the culmination of the development of the godless culture. They were just totally against God. So let's make a name for ourselves. And the building of a tower to go up to the heavens, obviously you can't get there. But at least it's symbolic. We're gonna be as high as the heavens. We're gonna have a name for ourselves. We don't need God. And we're all one in this. This is the thing. They were all one. They had the one accord. And they were going to do it. And they started doing it. And God just this is just total rebellion. And what's going to stop them from just doing whatever they want? Things are only going to get worse. And he already made a covenant that I'm not going to flood the earth again. If he wouldn't have done that, it would have been the story of Noah, And it would have been the story of someone after this time, second flood. Then there would have been a third flood. And there would have been a fourth flood. We would have just been flooding. But God didn't do that. Eventually, next week we'll get into Abraham. So God has another way. He's giving up on the entire created human race. But he's going to start the called race. That's next week. That's exceedingly positive. This week is just like the depths of the pit. This is as far as man can fall. Because man now is in complete rebellion against God. Now, the name Babel means confusion. This is very important. In the Bible, different nations, they depict different aspects of the world. And Egypt, what does Egypt depict? It depicts, the world, actually just the world, Satan's kingdom, enslaves man. Babylon comes out of Babel. This is the beginning of Babylon. And if we're looking at seeds that grow from Genesis, this is the big seed sown. Actually, first mentioned in Genesis chapter 10. Babel belonged to Nimrod. Don't ever name your kid Nimrod. It's just, why would you ever name your kid Nimrod anyway? If you want him to be teased incessantly, that's probably a good name. But anyway, this was his city. He was a descendant of Cush, who was a descendant of Ham, who was cursed by Noah. Anyway, he started Babel, and eventually this becomes Babylon. And Babylon, it's in many places, but I've got a couple verses here from 2 Chronicles. The children of Israel, they went to the good land, and they were there worshiping God. At least some of them were worshiping God properly. But then they'd turn away, and they'd worship idols. And then Jehovah would come in to discipline them. They'd turn. But gradually, it was just downhill. Eventually, Jehovah just said, I've got to just cleanse the land. So at that point, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, took Jerusalem, and took them all away captive, virtually all of them. They were in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. And again, Babylon is confusion. But actually, Babylon isn't just confusion, it's religious confusion. And this is really important. Because even this matter of making a name for ourselves, it's rebellion against God. If I'm rebelling against God, it's because I want to be someone. Right? Remember the principle of the tree of life, what is it? One word. Dependence, right? Dependence on God. Principle of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is independence. In other words, I can do it. I don't need your help. I'm not going to be sinful and do evil things, but I can do it. And this is what is cultivated in man. Independence. We look down on someone who's not independent. That guy, he's so dependent. He's just so needy. He's weak. Right? But actually, we need to depend on God. This is God's desire, that God would be everything to us. And this is just a declaration that, we want to make a corporate declaration. All the peoples of the world at that time, God, we do not need you. We're fine. Leave us alone. We're going to make a name for ourselves. Like I said, this is religious confusion. And if you get into the realm of religion, there's a tremendous amount of confusion. You go back to Cain and Abel. That was, in a sense, confusion. Which way would you offer? There's God's way, and then there's your own way, which looks really good. I'm going to offer you the best of my own effort. And God rejected it. It wasn't like, oh, boy, your heart's really in the right place. thanks so much. Yeah, it just doesn't quite fit. But I really appreciate the effort. Thank you so much. It's like, vegetables? Are you kidding? I don't hate you, but it's like, this is not the way you worship. Are you going to do it your way, or are you going to do it my way? Remember, I'm God. I created all this, and this is all for my purpose, and you're going to do it your own way? But this seed of confusion and unclarity just came in, and it continues to develop. There's this thing about making a name for yourself. I don't say anything to offend anyone. Sometimes I do. And sometimes I say things that might offend people. But even we were somewhere in Chicago driving out, and it was just very typical. Some church, building, and they got their signboard and whatever, what, it's the First Church of something. Big letters, Pastor so-and-so. Does it make a difference? I mean, are you going there for this guy?
Right.
Well, I mean, why don't they just say, Sunday worship, such and such a time. Come worship God with us. People say, let's give God all the glory. Why are you making your name so big? I've seen signs where it's like, church, da-da-da-da. And then in big letters, it's almost like, starring Pastor so-and-so, or Reverend so-and-so, or Dr. so-and-so. I mean, these ones, some of them are charlatans. Some of them are hypocrites. I'm not going to name who, but there's other ones, and they're genuinely serving the Lord. Maybe even the other ones, the charlatans, think they're serving the Lord, but it's just like nuts. I mean, they become the attraction, or other things can become the attraction. Like, we got the best worship band. Is it that important? Isn't God important? Isn't what God wants important? Isn't the worship that God desires important? Amen. We don't need to make a name for ourselves. We all have a name, obviously. But if I become so big. And this is the devil's thing. This is why he rebelled against God. He wanted to be equal with God. He wanted to be exalted the same. He says, I will exalt myself. I will sit, in the Most High. This is the source of rebellion in man. And this is the consummation of rebellion in the Old Testament. I was thinking, we got this pandemic, right? We're all sick of it. We're numb to it. We ignore it. We've had enough, right? You had enough. I've had enough a long time ago. But it's still here. And people are still getting sick, and some people are dying. I just found out last week someone that I know, I didn't realize, he had almost died. Some complications from it. Anyway, when it first started, I don't know if you remember, that long ago. But it's like, there's some kind of new flu in China. Something's going on. And you don't remember, unless you're really sharp, there's this thing called SARS. And SARS was, I don't know how many years before COVID. Maybe 12 years before, 15 years before, something like that. That's why I'm saying you guys shouldn't remember it. But it was the same thing. There was like a new virus in China, and it was really bad. Not that contagious, but if you got it, there's like a 50% chance you'd die. And so people were really concerned that this thing would spread, and they managed to contain it. So it's, So COVID starts, and this one, it's not as deadly, but it's way more contagious. So it's like, let's contain it. And what they didn't realize is, by the time things got out of China, they didn't tell us the whole story. The thing had already spread. and people had left and gone to other parts of the world. And people were getting sick without realizing it was COVID. So, everything had escaped. But it's like hopeful. Like, let's contain this thing. Let's, get a handle on it. Let's get a treatment for it. Let's get a vaccine for it. Oh, we got a vaccine. Great. It's done now. We're through with it. No. Or I got COVID. Now I've got immunity forever. I remember people were saying that. It's like, oh, I suffered through it, but now I'll never get it again. No, it lasts about 3 months. And then you get new variants. And now it's like, just give up. We're not gonna wipe it out. We're not gonna contain it. Let's try to live healthy and take care of ourselves. But it's just gonna be part of the human race now. It's like the flu. It's gonna come around. If that makes anyone depressed, sorry. I wish it wasn't that way. This rebellion in man, it's like, maybe we can contain it. Let's do this. Let's flood the earth. Wipe them all out. No, and God's not stupid. I mean, he knows what he's doing. And even the flood with Noah, it's a big type. But anyway, there's still this, man took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's part of our Constitution. So sin is in us. We are not a sinner. We're not a sinner until we sin. That's not true. We sin because we're sinners. If you had a child and Daniel's like, don't sin. He's 10 years old. He's never sinned. He's 12 years old. He's never sinned. Oh, good. He's got a chance. No. We've never taught him to sin. We never exposed him to violent video games. So he's going to be okay. No, it's in him. One day he'll lie to you. And he's been living in his room his whole life. He's never had interaction with another human being. Who taught him to lie? We didn't, any book that had lying in it, we took it out. The little babies, as soon as they learn to talk, they lie. And the first word they learn is no.
Right.
That's not the word you want them to learn. You want them to learn yes. Yes, Mommy. Yes, Daddy. But it's no. This is just the rebellious nature in mankind. There's something anti-God in us. This is why Christ was crucified. This is why we need to be crucified with Christ to put this to death. This is why we need to be born anew with a new life, which is not a sinful life. So we have the possibility of not sinning, not by our own effort, but we're crucified. We can allow the Lord's life to live in us. We can let this life grow in us, and eventually we can express Christ, not by our own effort, but by life. So there's two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So at this point, this is like just mankind did not stop being rebellious after that. It just continues. And this anti-God thing. But it's kind of a safeguard. So now the nations fight against each other. But if they could come together and really come to the same mind and agree on something, they'd probably say, let's all agree to oppose God. Let's make a name for ourselves. They built this thing with bricks, which is significant. God's building is made of stones. Bricks are something man-made. And bricks are made by burning. You get some clay, and they put back then they put straw or some kind of, fibrous material in, and they'd bake it. And they'd just bake all the life out of it. So this is something man-made, this is man's effort. Stones are something God created. There's stones everywhere. My backyard, I'm trying to get it ready for a garden. I cannot believe how many stones are there. They're not useful for building. They're too small. But anyway, God's building is made with stones. Man's building is made with man's effort. So God confounded their language. Eventually, though, Babylon rose up as a nation against God's people, even taking God's people into captivity. While they were there, some of them remained faithful to God and worshiping God, but that wasn't the place where they were supposed to worship. God chose a place, Jerusalem. They had to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, rebuild the altar, and that happened after 70 years of captivity. But it's interesting, not all of them left. Some of them stayed. Actually, most of them stayed. Just a small number came back. This is kind of the principle in the whole Bible. Usually, the number following the Lord is a small number. It's a remnant. It's not the whole. But if you go the way of the whole, you're going to be off. When I was younger, I might have told this story before, but I wasn't little. But I asked my pastor a question. I said, how do we know that we're right? You know, not just how do we know that Christians, this is the right way to worship? Even among Christians, I mean, we're in a certain denomination. How do we know that this is the right one? He had a terrible answer. He said, well, because among all the people in the world, Christians are not a majority. Among all the Christians, we're a smaller minority. In other words, it's like, why should I take this way? I was pretty astute. I was probably 12 years old or something. You know what he told me? And I was smart enough then to realize that was a bad answer. He said, the majority is not always right. I'm like, yeah, I'll buy that. But how does that prove we're right? That's a true statement. So that means the majority is always wrong? Anyway, he did not have a good answer to me to show that this is the way we should take. If you were with the children of Israel back in those days, you're in Babylon, in captivity, with all the idols, it should have been, how soon can we leave? Because we need to go worship God according to God's way. But they went back, and they were a minority. And actually, when they got back to Jerusalem, I will get done on time, they're the peoples of the land who were also kind of worshiping Jehovah, but in a very mixed way. All mixed up. They had idol worship. They'd worship the idols. They'd call it worship to Jehovah. So when they came back to build the temple, these people said, hey, we'll help you. We worship Jehovah too. And Esther, you would have said, oh, great, more help. Man, I hope you wouldn't have said that. But their answer was to them, it was a very offensive answer. It's, you have no part of this. Go away. And they didn't say, oh, wow, okay, we really appreciate your view on these things. We'll go peacefully. No, this made them mad. Then it's like, we're going to stop you from doing that. So it's like, wait a minute. You said you worship Jehovah. Now you want to stop us from worshiping Jehovah? Because we told you, you guys are full of idolatry and mixture. I think if they would have said, you are right. Man. Okay, guys, let's get rid of the idols. And we're going to go to you, and you teach us how to worship Jehovah properly. Because we want to worship God in the right way. If they would have done that, they might have said, okay, why don't you come be with us for a while? And then maybe after a little while, we'd feel good, you can help. But no, they had a name for themselves. They were doing their thing, their way. And in doing it, they were opposing the ones who were actually building God's temple properly. Now you go to the book of Revelation, and there are two cities mentioned. One is the New Jerusalem, the holy city Jerusalem, This is the ultimate consummation of God's building. This is not heaven, even though the description, a lot of times people use that to describe heaven. It's a very, very significant, this is not the right word, use of the word, it's a significant sign. It's a great sign. It means something. You know, it's gold streets, pearl gates, made of precious stones, gold, pearl, precious stones. This is the ultimate expression of God. This is what he's after. It's not a physical city. It's a sign. But there's something else called Babel. If you look at these last passage, the very end, it's like all caps. I know if you send text and you write in all caps, that's like yelling at people. I don't know why. But you go to Bibles, and a lot of them have this written in all caps. And this was done before texting was invented. So the point is, I don't know why it's in all caps. There must be something in the original language that indicates, guys, this is really important. I want you to pay attention to it. So John, in spirit, he's shown the great harlot. In the end of the Bible, there's a bride, another woman. This is the bride of Christ, who is the holy city. And then there's a harlot. You know what a harlot is, right? It's an old-fashioned word for prostitute, you know, a bad lady. I like to keep things clean. And what did she do? She was committing fornication with the kings of the earth. And he saw a woman. What is she? She's clothed in purple and scarlet, gilded. You know what gilded? That's like plated. So if you have some kind of thing and it's gold plated, you might say, this is gold. No, it's not. It's gold plated. It's not worth that much. It's got a little, molecules, depth of gold on it. But it looks like gold. It looks good. But it's not. She's gilded with gold and precious stones and pearls. She looks like the holy city in that sense. And she's got a golden cup. What's it full of? Abominations and unclean things of her fornication. So this is the other city. This is the other woman. This is the ultimate harvest of Babel in the Old Testament, developing as Babylon. And this is the ultimate in religious confusion. Sometime, not this semester, we'll get into the book of Revelation. Or if you want to get into Revelation, we can have a Bible study. We can get into all these things. But this is just to show you tonight, there's a seed. And it already started with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It develops into rebellion against God, uniting people in rebellion against God, to build something which is not the same as God's building. But it's subtle, it's tricky. So people, even in their worship, we say, come, we're worshiping God, same as you. Come, worship with us. One time we were out preaching the gospel, going door to door, and we went into a home, and I think it's okay to say this, and we were welcomed in warmly by a Muslim family. And after talking for just a very short time, they were not interested in Jesus. But they said, we're having some friends over, we're going to have a worship. It's the same as you, monotheistic God. And we very politely excused ourselves. Sorry, I've got to change the oil in my car or something. Anyway, we got out. It's not the same. Some people's view, it's all the same. It's not the same. And it's a distraction. It's a confusion. But they were so nice. The people there are so nice. Really nice. Oh, and their music was so good. And the speaker, man, he was so good, and he was entertaining, and oh man. And then they gave me a ride home, and they gave me the car. I mean, you laugh. I know a case like that. So, yeah. I'm going to go where there's good food and free cars. But this is not God's way. God has his own building. His building is pure. This is something counterfeit. This is something deceiving. And I'm done.